It's Christmas time, and so I have been rewatching all of the Nativity films, and of course the standout in all of these films is Mr. Poppy, the teacher that we all wanted as a kid, who basically is a child himself. But as I was watching the first Nativity, I started to think to myself just how mad it is having a teacher like Mr. Poppy, and how much of a contrast he is to Mr. Madden's, and it made me wonder, is Mr. Poppy actually there? Or is he just a figment of Mr. Madden's imagination? Did Mr. Madden's just dream up Mr. Poppy? Is he actually a Christmas ghost, almost to help Mr. Madden's along the way? Well, today we find out. But before we go any further, please make sure that you've clicked that red subscribe button down below and have your notifications turned on. Now, this theory is pretty mad, so I want you to try and see where I'm coming from and let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. But I will say this theory does not work with any of the future Nativity films, so Nativity 2, 3 or 4. For this, we're just going to solely look at Nativity 1 and wonder whether all of the part with Mr. Poppy actually happened or didn't. Because if you look throughout this film, Mr. Poppy doesn't actually really do anything drastic, it's all Mr. Madden's. It's all Mr. Madden's choices and decisions that are just being influenced by Mr. Poppy, but Paul has the say at the end of the day. And it's the beginning and the ending of this film that really makes me question whether Mr. Poppy is actually there. The film starts with Paul Madden's talking about how he went to drama school with his best friends Jennifer and Gordon Shakespeare. Paul went off into primary school teaching, his love Jennifer went off to Hollywood, and Gordon basically ends up being everything Paul wanted to be as a teacher, and his nativities are always way better than Mr. Madden's. And all this leads to Paul hating Christmas. In other words, being a sort of Scrooge-esque type figure. And before Mr. Poppy is even introduced, it is announced that Mr. Madden's will be directing the brand new Nativity play at St. Bernadette's. In other words, his absolute worst nightmare, full of everything that he hates. And he goes to complain to Mrs. Bevan and eventually reluctantly agrees to do this play. And then wouldn't you know, that is when Mr. Poppy is introduced. In other words, he ends up being visited by his Christmas ghost or angel. And Mr. Madden's is very confused by the appearance of Mr. Poppy. He doesn't know he's coming, and it's very unusual that a school would suddenly bring in a brand new teaching assistant halfway through the term when they haven't had one before, who hasn't had any experience whatsoever. So I reckon Mr. Poppy is actually just an imagination of the subconscious from Mr. Madden's, as sort of like a fun alter ego that he has in order to make his nativity successful. So he isn't actually there, and everything that the children do with Mr. Poppy are them just messing around, and Mr. Madden's thinking that Mr. Poppy is with them. Because Mr. Madden's does all of the nativity himself. Mr. Poppy is just there to make it seem more joyful. It's Mr. Madden's who writes all the songs, but Mr. Poppy makes them seem more fun. It's Mr. Madden's who says the children are useless and won't be able to do anything, but then Mr. Poppy helps him see the faith in the children. And then it's the children's responses to all this that further makes me believe that Mr. Poppy was never there at all and was just in Mr. Madden's imagination. The children know that Paul Madden's is a very sad and angry teacher, and so his ghost is sent to show him some joy. In the scene where Mr. Madden's reads out the children's Christmas letters, none of them mention Mr. Poppy. Considering he is their favourite teacher ever, it's a bit weird that they wouldn't ask Santa for their own Mr. Poppy. They only mention how they want Mr. Madden's to be happy, as if Mr. Poppy doesn't exist. And they only see Mr. Madden's as their teacher in these letters.
Please make my teacher happy, because he seems really sad. He doesn't even like Christmas.
And we know that the kids all know about Jennifer anyway. It's Mr. Poppy who asks them about why Mr. Madden's is so down, and the kids talk about how his girlfriend left him at Christmas. And when Sadie has her chat with Mr. Madden's about not wanting to be on stage, Mr. Madden exclaims how he needs her to do it for him, as if clinging on to what Mr. Poppy and this nativity is giving him is all that is making him happy right now. Kind of sounds similar to something Scrooge goes through in A Christmas Carol. And in terms of the whole Hollywood situation, it isn't Mr. Poppy who starts it. We see Paul talking to Gordon Shakespeare and making up the whole Hollywood story without any influence of Mr. Poppy. And whilst it is implied that Mr. Poppy is the one who told everyone, it's not ever confirmed, and we never see him actually say to anyone, this is what happened. It's just as plausible that Gordon Shakespeare said something to the press, or Paul let something slip up, which then brings the news to St. Bernadette's. I mean, I wouldn't put it past Gordon doing something like this to make Paul look bad. And throughout the whole Hollywood scenario, Mr. Poppy is never brought up, such as the parents' evening scene where the parents are asking Paul about what Hollywood will mean for the kids. Mr. Madden responds to them, and then Mr. Poppy says something absolutely ridiculous, and the parents just don't respond to any of Mr. Poppy's claims, as if he's not actually saying them, as if he's not there, as if he's just some sort of ghost in Mr. Madden's head.
Yeah, but also we've got the death slide.
How much are you paying?
£1 million. I think, I've heard.
And when Mrs. Bevan finds out that Paul went to Hollywood to see Jennifer, which let's not forget was his idea, not Mr. Poppy's, she barely even acknowledges Mr. Poppy is there and instead says all of this to Paul. And it's Miss Rye who tells her about the lie, not Mr. Poppy. And as soon as Mr. Poppy is gone, Mr. Madden goes back to the Scrooge self way, and we see him beating himself up about it. The kids are annoyed and they say they miss Mr. Poppy, but what if they're actually meaning they miss the fun side of Mr. Madden's? They miss the fun side of their teacher. They miss the fun way their teacher acted when they were putting on this nativity. Because how Paul responds to them and why they get so excited, he doesn't say, "I'm bringing back Mr. Poppy." He instead says,
"Meet me in the hall in 10 minutes. We're doing the play."
And then there's the bit at the end when Paul, Gordon and Jennifer are up on stage together and Mr. Poppy isn't with them, but is instead behind them and holds up none other than the kid dressed as an angel. And then we don't see him again throughout the rest of the film because his time as the Christmas angel or Christmas ghost, his time as being Mr. Madden's alter ego, is finally over. Now, this might be the maddest theory that I've ever came up with, and it is then completely undone by the fact that we have Nativity 2, 3 and 4 where Mr. Poppy is definitely real and he definitely makes decisions himself. But in fairness, those films break canon all the time and mess up the whole established law that this first film set out, and surely we're allowed crazy theories for a Christmas film. But what do you guys think about this? Do you think that Mr. Poppy did actually exist, or do you think that he actually wasn't there, isn't real, and is just a figment of Mr. Madden's imagination? Let me know all your thoughts down below in the comments, and have you rewatched Nativity this Christmas? I absolutely love this film. And as always, we've been here at Gate of Theories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.
I built up inside, oh why can't I? Will someone look for me if I disappear? No matter how much that I scream, nobody hears. But I see the light from far away, it's down the line. Maybe I should not give up without a fight, 'cause there will be a time, oh, oh, oh.